Dobar dan svima vama koji se sada uključujete. Uživo ste na kanalu Radio Televizije Atlas. Pratite Pop kvart, vašu dnevnu dozu kulture. Današnji Pop kvart rezervisali smo za New York i tamošnji najpoznatiji muzej modernih umjetnosti i jednu arhitektonsku postavku.
So here we are on the 9th floor conservation studio. We're standing in front of this large object here. The object is actually a kitchen. It was designed by Le Corbusier in his atelier from 1947 to 1952. This is really an important point in modern architecture, particularly for Le Corbusier. And Anne Grady has been working with us for the past year, helping us to conserve the object and ready it for exhibition.
Corbusier, Charles-Édouard Jeanneret, was an architect and designer and was one of the most important figures in modern architecture. This is one of Corb's first attempts to really merge high design and low-cost housing, which really became a signature for him throughout his career. At the time, Corbusier was looking a lot at cruise ships because they had that hyper-efficiency in their space use, and he wanted to translate that into an apartment building.
The piece arrived to the museum in large crates. We unpacked it, and we were able to get our first view of all of these elements.
It was almost entirely complete, but it wasn't totally complete. There were missing elements. It was unclear how some sections fit together.
We then went to Marseille because we wanted to see these kitchens actually in situ.
Being able to go back to the original building answered a lot of our questions about how to eventually install this piece in MoMA. The Radiant City was built in Marseille primarily to house people who had been displaced by World War II. It was an attempt really to find an efficient way to fit as many people into this building as possible, but still provide them with quality housing.
Everything was thought out, everything from the way the use of the apartment, but also then the colors and the palette. And one of the big conservation treatments here for this object is to reveal what that original paint palette or that campaign was.
During our research at the Corbusier Foundation, we found a lot of specs for how these kitchens were supposed to be painted, and Corbusier was very specific not only about which colors could be used where, but how the paint was actually supposed to be applied. But when we actually went to Marseille, there was a lot of variation from kitchen to kitchen. Even when the building was originally opened, people didn't stick to those directions as specifically as we thought they were going to. So we couldn't look at one kitchen in the building and be sure that that's the way our kitchen was painted. So we decided to take cross-sections from all of our surfaces. We were taking a sample of paint that would run down from the top layers through every single layer of overpaint that had been added to these pieces in the 60 years of their use down to the wood. And then once we had this chip of paint, we could look at it under the microscope and see which layers were added first.
We were under the assumption that this came from one apartment. As we continued to put this thing together and look more closely, we realized that actually it was cobbled together and the kitchen probably came from at least 3 different apartments. The actual structuring of the layers of paint is different.
We were seeing 5 or 6 layers of paint, a lot of white. White on top of white on top of white, which is too bad because, as you can see now, there's a lot of color in these kitchens, and there was always supposed to be a lot of color. So this panel is the original color now. All the overpaint's been removed, but because it was over the stove, you can see it's slightly more damaged than some of the other original surfaces. Every object is an artifact of its own history, and so we want to maintain the history of this piece. As we're taking paint layers off, we're documenting and continually discussing with our colleagues what the next best step is.
Nadam se da vam je današnja Pop kvart priča bila interesantna, a sa novim pričama iz kulture vidimo se ponovo sjutra. Do tada budite dobri i budite dobro. Prijatno.